Abundance is infinite.
It's really about shifting your whole perspective and mindset and not valuing things or measuring worth and wealth in terms of an extractive, unjust currency, and then switching your whole orientation to the new money system that is the fair free market money system, the money system of God.
When the government starts taking charge of it, how much it's actually kind of miscued.
Once we start from that perspective of unity, of identifying equally with everything, not looking at things as separate from me, then that is the state of being of love that we cultivate, and from there, all of our actions will perpetuate, create more love.
If the simplest definition of enlightenment is freedom, then this is our ability to create freedom for everyone.
Hello, my name is Connor, and this is my co-host Ellis, and we are the New Earth podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to talk about the New Earth, the transformation that is taking place throughout the entire world, throughout consciousness, throughout culture, throughout society, throughout finance, ecology, metaphysics, philosophy, and all how they all tie together. And so the way we talk about that is by finding things throughout the month that interest us, that relate to this transformation on a grand scheme, and then we share this content and how it relates to this transformation into the new earth, and talk to you about it and what we think about it and all of that. So let's get right into it for this month.
Yeah, so the first topic that we have is a continuation from the topic last time. And so let's just jump straight into this clip because I think this will be perfect.
Federal prohibition of psychedelic medicine in America is over. On the 250th year, on the 250th year of our nation's founding, everyone who has fought for this day through decades of monumental struggle, sacrifice, and suffering can now declare a seminal victory for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Rights we bear as images of our eternal Creator, whose essence is almighty, eternal, unconditional love for each and every one of us.
Yeah, that's pretty fire.
Is the end of the beginning. We have moved mountains, yet there are...
Yeah, so I think with those clips, we got the gist of what's happening. I think this is funny because last time we were talking about how psychedelics were becoming more popular and becoming more of a mainstream thing. And now, right after we had that conversation, maybe a week after,
Yep.
I mean, these clips happened. Trump, has all these orders about psychedelics and drug research. What I think is also really important to note about these is that while this is a huge success, we're just moving, the culture into the right direction. You do want to be very wary because we can look at a lot of these fields when the government starts taking charge of it, how much it's actually kind of miscued in a lot of ways. I think a huge example is the cannabis industry. Now that cannabis that is now an industry itself kind of has its own issues with pesticide usage and just a lot of, poor understanding of how these plant medicines really work. And so, what happens when Big Pharma has psychedelics and we're using Big Pharma psychedelics? Like, we do have to still be cautious on this front, but this is still a huge win. Just having this opportunity for research to be done on these things is a huge thing. I mean, it's been banned for a long time with a lot of these psychedelics. So I'm excited to see what the research says. Just you always with a grain of salt, who's funding the research and everything like that.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point. So we can't get, too lost in the giddiness of our excitement. But it is a great, thing worth celebrating that took place. RFK, Joe Rogan, Trump came together and really, did something pretty huge for psychedelics for people. I think a lot of the attention was on Ibogaine and on veterans. So, I mean, those are the things that open the door for, a lot of downstream healing and other, uses that are going to be, a result of that. But absolutely your point that Big Pharma is going to screw it up somehow. The government's going to screw it up. Regulations will screw it up. Scientists with their materialist paradigms will screw it up.
Right.
Therapists trying to think they know what's best is going to screw it up. But at the end of the day, right, we'll see that constant movement towards more and more refined action.
Right.
Right. So, I think I'm pretty confident at least that we already know from the research, based on the research, the mainstream materialist scientist community already knows that ego death is the source of the healing with the psychedelic compounds, just as we discussed last time. And so that being already known and accepted, that's the biggest win, I would say, at that point is okay, most of the screw ups are probably going to come from corporate capture type things that, limit access and make it inconvenient. But the really good news is that while this will simultaneously open up opportunities for people to take these, have these experiences through formal legal means, it'll also make it easier to do it through less legal, more informal means that can produce just as equal healing processes and results. So, yeah, I mean, this is worth celebrating, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I got one more celebration from the administration that I'll pull up as well.
I'm pleased to announce a landmark set of actions by EPA to safeguard the nation's drinking water from microplastics, pharmaceuticals, forever chemicals, and dozens of other contaminants. At the heart of these actions is our draft 6th contaminant candidate list, known as CCL6, which we are releasing today for public comment. CCL6 is a critical tool under the Safe Drinking Water Act that drives research, funding, and future regulation of emerging threats in public water systems.
That's all really I wanted to show. But just more of the administration, really pushing towards holistic health stuff and the betterment of humans. I mean, the drinking water has been one of the most slept on things in America, at least, where most people don't even realize how terrible the water is, how toxic the water is.
Yeah.
I mean, this concept of fourth phase of water and a lot of these more proven scientific understandings is just not really adapted into modern society, which is really necessary when you really understand the body and water. So, but it's really cool to see another win coming out of the government is actually just taking steps to clean up the water in a more proficient way, not with more chemicals that are creating toxins.
Man, it's crazy how simple it really is that we just don't put, toxins in the water. And they want to figure out the loophole, if we'll figure out the safe amount, the safe level of this toxin, whether it's, chlorine or fluoride or whatever they're putting. What's the safe level? And it's man, there's no safe level. It's just what's the level that doesn't it doesn't easily show up as obviously causing problems on a large scale when you study it based on your study methodology. It's just the simple thing is we just shouldn't be trying to have poison in our water at any form, at any amount, right? It's so simple, so clear, but yet somehow a problem still to this day. But really glad to see that we're making some progress on that. I see RFK right next to him there, so I wonder how much of this was influenced from RFK. I was really glad, to see him and Trump's partnership before, whenever the election was taking place. So glad to see RFK's been doing a lot of good stuff, assuming he had a big hand in this one as well, like he did with the psychedelics. So grateful to him.
Yeah, I think it's a huge thing for people to really understand is that the way in which the government and a lot of these higher industries are working is that they're really keeping this toxicity at a very minimal level so that it's not immediately noticed. But that's almost more dangerous than when it's immediately noticed, because what happens over time when you just keep on toxifying someone in a long period of time in a very unnoticeable amount? I mean, that's definitely having an effect on the system, and especially with all the other toxins on part with no education on how to detoxify the body. I mean, we're wearing rubber shoes, for example, not getting out in the sun. So we have no real way to create this cleanse in our system. And that's the most dangerous thing that we can do, is have these hidden levels of toxins throughout all of our life.
All right. No, I'm so skeptical as to how they determine what these safe levels are.
Right.
Because like some toxins accumulate more than others, and some people are more sensitive to them or more sensitive to accumulation, and it's just, you know, the regardless of accumulation or not, whenever there's toxins entering the body's going to have to use resources, energetic resources, to detoxify and fight against that to keep itself healthy. And so if your body's constantly in a state of trying to fight off these constant intoxing, then how are you going to be able to fully use all of your resources for your self-actualization, for, really not just surviving, but living and becoming, greater and greater and more vital every day. It's just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, yeah. So those are the first few clips I wanted to do. I think based off of our last one, it was very important. You want to jump onto any of your clips?
Sure, yeah. All right, well, first let's just look at this, actually.
Cool.
This writing here. Okay, so all the big banks, along with the Treasury Secretary and the Fed Chair, got together in an emergency meeting to talk about AI because Anthropic has developed some capacity in their AI system to, it seems like, threaten banking security. And so they were so worried about the threat that it could pose to banking security that they didn't want to even release this model to the public. And this is a model that a private company made. So this is I guess something to definitely be aware about, that now it's getting to the point with AI that private companies are making things that could theoretically be serious threats to the structure of society, like the banking system. And yeah, it seems like very interesting technology, capable of infiltrating national defense systems and taking down huge chunks of the internet. And that while a team of humans can discover 100 critical flaws with no immediate fixes per year, Mythos can find thousands. So exponentially more capable than humans. Not only identifying weaknesses in a system, but also exploiting them. So just, super hacking technology, basically. Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I don't know how much of a role we can play in all of that, but definitely something to be aware of, to maybe be prepared for. Just having your eggs in more than one basket maybe is a good idea. Not to be all doomsday prepper mode on y'all, but like, I guess just being strategic and safe about how you spend your time, how you save your resources, and just keeping up to date with potential technologies and things like this.
Yeah, I think we'll just jump straight into one of the other topics I have, because this lines up really well with it. And that is kind of the stocks and crypto news that has been blowing up recently. So let's first start with all the stocks. I mean, we had this giant, this is May 6th, we had this giant upsurge in the stock market. Everything started blowing up. And one of the big things why I think this is super interesting was the amount of people talking about how they are using AI, specifically Claude, for this stock trading. So people are using AI to follow all these stocks and then just make thousands of dollars. I mean, there were cases of people, retiring themselves just from this one upsurge. And they're all really pushing for AI to be the thing that helped them get there, because AI is now the technology to do that. And you think it's crazy now, but the exponential nature of technology is so crazy. Let's look at this video of just AI from 2023. Yeah, this is like the new baseline for technology. We can see Will Smith is going to be eating pasta, and we'll go from 2023, 2024, 2025, and 2026. see how much better AI got just in 4 years.
All right.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot. Uncle Phil, come try this. Fresh pasta of Bel Air.
So have you heard of Kling 3.0?
I heard it can create multiple scene cuts like this with a single prompt. And it knows when to cut to whoever is talking.
But did you know that all this audio was also generated with the same prompt?
I guess I didn't, sir.
Study harder, kid. Eat your spaghetti.
Jeez, man. Jeez.
Yeah, so I mean, just looking at that, you're seeing from 2025 to 2026, it was a crazy jump. But
Yeah.
I mean, just in this quick 4 years, how quickly AI is going, I think that's just a really funny example of a benchmark of how AI is going. But when we're going back to the news of the stock market and what we were just talking about, I think another huge thing to think about, especially when you're talking about putting your eggs in multiple baskets, is looking at Bitcoin, for example, and what all the people have been saying about Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency space, especially after the stock market upgrade. And this is one of the main charts that everyone's really talking about, is this buy zone and these cycles that Bitcoin is seemingly going through, and how we're actually in a buy zone right now. Bitcoin has dropped a lot since last year. And I mean, we have videos of the experts. You want to check out one of them?
About where you see Bitcoin hitting at the end of the year and in a year from now when we're back at this conference?
Well, I think Bitcoin's going to continue to grind up. I think the volatility is coming off of it as the industry becomes more structured with more derivatives and more ways to hedge it. Our expectation right now is end of the year, it should be about $150,000. And that's the consensus of the equity analysts that cover our company and the Bitcoin industry right now. I don't know why it won't grind up to $1 million a coin over the next 4 to 8 years. I would think not less than 4, not more than 8. And of course, my long-term forecast is it goes up about 30% a year for the next 20 years, and we're headed toward $20 million Bitcoin.
Michael, thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, so Michael Saylor, love that man.
Yeah.
He's doing a lot of great things for Bitcoin, for the world in that way. And so, I mean, yeah, what he was commenting on, besides just the price prediction, is that, you know, what he does with MicroStrategy is making these derivatives of Bitcoin. So ways to make purchasing Bitcoin easier for large institutions as well as individuals, just by removing some of the risk. By, you know, they take on the risk, his company takes on the risk, and then gives you a guaranteed dividend based on the profit, so that you don't have to be nervous about the volatility of Bitcoin, because they take all the volatility risk and then give you a smaller portion of the appreciation of Bitcoin as payment, essentially, for taking on that volatility risk. And so, yeah, what he's doing is basically making Bitcoin so much more available to the world because of that, because most people are worried about its volatility. So, yeah, hugely appreciative to him for providing that service and sparking the inspiration of many others to also provide that service. But, you know, to the original point, now is absolutely the time to buy. There's never a bad time to buy Bitcoin, I would say. You know, really what it comes down to is, what is your time horizon and what is your risk, and then your risk tolerance, and then what is your understanding and you know, your position on what the future holds for money and for the world. So I would say, if you're looking for a short-term thing with Bitcoin, like short-term profit of a year or 2 years, then, you know, that's hard. That's really hard for anybody to guarantee. But if you have some technical analysis skills, you might have an edge. You can look at the charts like we pulled up, and then maybe, you know, you have some more conviction behind a short-term thing. But really with Bitcoin, for me, it's not a short-term thing at all. It's about switching into a fair money system from a corrupt extraction slavery system, which is the current money system that we're in with fiat money. So really, this is why it's so important to me and to our mission, is that the current money system is unfair and unjust, and the Bitcoin hard money based system is fair. It's the form of divine money that humanity has always wanted. And so, it's really about shifting your whole perspective and mindset into being not valuing things or measuring worth and wealth in terms of an extractive, unjust currency, and then switching your whole orientation to the new money system that is the fair free market money system, the money system of God. And whenever you make that shift internally, that transformation is so profound for your realization of justice in the world, and your realization of abundance in the world, and taking action to support that will just further create this experience of justice and fairness and abundance in your own life. So, I think that's why Bitcoin is absolutely huge for those of us on the self-actualization path, because self-actualization can't just be for me or for you. It has to be for the whole world at the end of the day. And so how we handle trade and money is absolutely important for that.
Yeah, and on top of all of that, it's the sovereignty aspect of it as well. If the simplest definition of enlightenment is freedom, then this is our ability to create freedom for everyone. This is how we actually change to that new earth money system for freedom. And like you said, the self-actualization isn't just for one of us. This is why every self-actualized person always teaches about self-actualization. Jesus, Buddha. It's not like it's for one specific type of person. It's for everyone.
Right.
So yeah, I think this is a huge, cool topic, especially with the booming of the stock market. It's very interesting to see what's taking place with AI, the money system, even in the midst of all this war and craziness that's happening through the government.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on a note in relation to people wondering about the timing of the rise of Bitcoin, I'll just speak to that a little bit, even though that's not the main point. It's not the most important part. But the way things currently stand with the world, it seems like it does make a lot of sense in the relative near term, that Bitcoin's price should be appreciating significantly, like up to 30% a year, like Saylor was saying. So I would say that's a pretty safe general expectation to have for the near term as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So it strains credulity to think there won't be, that won't be that outcome. And then I guess the last option is, really one of two options. Number one, like the Iranians get a say, right? Even if we say declare victory and walk away, they keep shooting. And if I'm them, I'm going to keep shooting. Absolutely, I'm going to. That's an indictment. And the last one is, look, we do something extreme, like we go in and we nuke them. And like every day this goes on, that it is not going tactically, it's going fine for us, but strategically, when you run out of interceptor missiles, what do we think Israel is going to do when they completely run out of interceptors? Which, oh, by the way, they probably need Chinese rare earths to maintain supplies of. What do we think they're going to do? I don't know. Would they do the Samson option? Maybe. Then what? So there's these, and yeah, I guess the last thing is the Iranians they're telling you they'll let oil move for yuan. And people say, well, there's no, yuan is it's a closed capital account, blah, blah, blah. They're missing what the Iranians are doing. That's gold for oil. How do you get yuan? It's simple. You sell dollars, you buy gold, you take the gold to China, you sell the gold to China for yuan, you take the yuan to Iran, you buy the oil, you put it on a boat, you sail it out of there, and away you go. And so that option is absolutely the end of the post-$71 system. That is whether we're allowing it to happen, or as some assert, or whether we can't do anything about it, like sink the Chinese boats moving the stuff, doesn't matter. You've got a yuan oil system parallel running alongside the dollar oil system, And that is de facto the end of the dollar's post 71 status. So my best case, the happy outcome at this point is we walk away, we let them keep control of the Strait of Hormuz. They continue to transact in yuan through gold. Gold goes to the moon, the dollar falls sharply. That facilitates a reindustrialization of the US, high inflation, probably yield curve control, capital controls in the United States. That's the good outcome at this point. They all get uglier from that point.
Yeah, so that's heavy economic stuff, lots of jargon in there. But the basic point of that, what Luke is saying, is that there's a shift happening right now, and the U.S. dollar hegemony is losing its power, as well as the OPEC oil cartel is losing its power throughout the world. So OPEC has had this oil cartel essentially for many years, where they control the price of oil, and this is very inefficient for the entire world because it's not free market. The cartel controlling the price of oil means that oil's artificially more expensive than it would be in a completely free market system. So that means energy as a whole, and that's literally going to trickle down to all abundance, is being artificially kept at a higher price. And so this cartel, this oil cartel of OPEC falling is super significant because this means more abundance for the entire world. And then simultaneous to that is the U.S. dollar hegemony falling. And I know Luke didn't specifically mention OPEC, but that is just very much in relation. It's happening simultaneously as part of the same process. But with the U.S. dollar losing hegemony, this also is more efficient for the world because it paves the way for multipolar powers, which is going to lead to more free markets and more fair trade, as long as there's not super isolationist policies from nations. But particularly for the U.S., this is very significant because as he said, we basically come down to two outcomes. We can either keep the U.S. dollar dominance and then have all of our industry basically siphoned out into other nations where it's cheaper to have that industry, such as China, or we can devalue the dollar and reindustrialize the U.S., which is, I guess, generally thought of as safer for national security, and in general, being able to make some of the stuff you need in your own country just kind of makes sense rather than being completely reliant on China for like masks, for example, even though I'm not a fan of masks. But it's just, one point. Let's say something I'm actually a fan of, like, car parts or something. If you want to make car parts in America, but somehow we get in a political rivalry that escalates with China, and then now we can't get car parts, well, that kind of stinks, right? So there's definitely something to be said for the value of lowering the U.S. dollar relative to other currencies because it's artificially inflated, and then reindustrializing the U.S. a bit so we can make some of our own stuff again, which is really good outcome. But to speak to the specific mechanics of what's happening here, he talked about the trade between Iran and China for oil and yuan. And so specifically what he's referring to here is the fact that the U.S. has had this restriction on the entire world for a long time that we can only trade oil in terms of dollars. But what's happening right now is they're going around, they're circumnavigating that whole thing that, we put this stranglehold on the world because we had the power to do so. Now we don't have the power and the leverage to do so. Ironically, because we've deindustrialized and raised the value of our dollar. So we created this with, from the beginning, this was going to happen. And we just were short-sighted, and that's why it happened. So not very good strategy on the U.S. government's part, but that's what you get with short-term thinking and short election cycles, right? It's just the nature of politics. But anyway, so what's happening here is that countries take their U.S. dollars, exchange it for gold, the neutral reserve asset that is the default net settlement reserve asset of the world right now, that Bitcoin is contending with. People take their U.S. dollars, they trade that for gold, then they give the gold to China, and then now you have yuan, which you can use to buy the oil. And so, or you can just buy the oil with the gold, either way. And so this whole system is that now China can have a market for oil in yuan, which directly competes with the U.S. Market for oil in U.S. dollars. And so This is just evidence of the massive transition that's taking place right now, of the U.S. dollar and U.S. as a whole losing its hegemony over the entire world, and now the world's becoming multi-powered, as you can see through these economic transformations.
And so now America has effectively sold $65 trillion of its assets to foreign sovereign wealth funds and foreign investors. And there is a financial industrial complex that I call transnational capital. It consists of institutions like BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. It consists of partnerships with sovereign wealth funds, Norway in Europe, Singapore in ASEAN, the Gulf countries in the Middle East. And there is one country that is sovereign to a degree right now, which is the country where no corporation is bigger than their government, the CCP. They have a state banking system. They have a manufacturing base, and they're trying to become oil independent or energy independent through alternative renewable energies. There is one sovereign country in the world right now, which is China. So China is dictating terms because all the sovereign wealth funds rely upon them purchasing energy. And then that lies into investments in the capital markets. And then what happens in America or the West, you have three main powers: technology, which is algorithms and control over media; finance, which is leverage through financial weapons of mass destruction, derivatives; private equity, private credit; central banking, retail banking, investment banking, asset management. And then you have military. But the military are public companies. So while they get a degree of autonomy because they're funded by the Pentagon, they still are public companies. So they rely upon this financial industrial complex. So I call it a FIC, MIC, and TIC: financial industrial complex, military industrial complex, and technical industrial complex. I believe that transnational capital, through lobby, controls Senate, Congress, and through the military and deep state are able to bribe judicial. So everything you see in politics is theatrical uniparty. You get a little bit of left and right that looks like internal difference, but the same financial industrial complex benefits. And I believe that Trump is very aligned with the financial industrial complex. Biden was very aligned with the military industrial complex, the neocon faction of the world. And I believe that the financial industrial complex wants a drastic change in the Middle East, a transition to regional stability and the end of the forever war, because the Gulf countries have co-opted BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, and China is now dictating terms. And America can't just blow up the region and prop up the petrodollar. Right. So I think everything we've seen over the last 5 years, even when it goes from closed border to open borders, I believe Trump was installed for a specific purpose. I think tariff policy was BlackRock's policy. I think Russia already won the war before Trump was installed. I think that China already won the trade war, and tariffs was the reset of the world order. And I think Iran effectively is escalating this through the closure of Strait of Hormuz for the final battle that leads to a pre-negotiated outcome and deal. But you need to use the US military, Israeli military, and IRGC to effectively get rid of all the US infrastructure in the Middle East, which IRGC is doing. Israel's getting rid of the proxies that are going to be integrated, like Lebanon will integrate with.
So yeah, that's a lot. Simon here, he's got a real wide systems view of all the geopolitics, all that craziness throughout the entire world. Super interesting to hear his theory on this, being, in summary, that there's 4 major world powers: the financial complex, technological complex, military complex, which all of these are basically the majority of the world, in terms of who's controlling things in the West. And then you basically just got China as the 4th power. And so very interesting to see like the coordination that he's describing between these groups, that really there's coordination across countries that's sort of unseen, through like the CIA, their operations, the financial complex being possibly the main string pullers of the whole thing in the West, and then the technocrats kind of trying to control society's perception of it all. And that's just super interesting, to see like, okay, so China probably sees all of this pretty clearly, and it makes China seem, a lot smarter really at the end of it. Just, of course, not into the anti-free market practices they do, but them seeing this and saying, well, I don't want to be overtaken by that. I want to remain sovereign. And so they do what they can and play the chess game with these other three powers, and play it pretty effectively, it seems like, because they've used our greatest weapon against us, the US dollar hegemony. They've used that to deindustrialize us, and now they have all the leverage to make these deals, just like we were talking about, because every country in the world depends on them to buy energy, to prop up the markets, depends on China to produce basic goods and services to prop up the base of the world economy. And so China's accumulated the leverage. They saw the century of humiliation. They were like, no, we got to turn this around. And it seems like they're doing a pretty decent job of that. Even of course, they have all kinds of stuff to work through, all kinds of problems at home for sure. But just a very interesting theory Simon's got here about the whole, art of it all, which I don't have as much information to speak to, but the theatrical aspect of it is like how much of what we see on the stage of geopolitics is theater or not, and there's actually really just one uniparty, as he says, coordinating and kind of directing everything in the world. I don't know. I'm not sure. Hard to speak on that. But definitely one thing I can speak to is I do agree that there's a lot of theatrics that in politics and news and everything that just distracts people, gets them, fighting each other, and then, on certain divisive topics, so that they don't spend time looking at the things that are really should be looked at deeper.
I mean, I think a really obvious one that we can point out to his theory and what you're saying is the Epstein files. I mean, Epstein files is kind of pointing to that theory, that it's not really the governments that are really in control, but it's these private institutions, these huge powers that are kind of working together, that are using governments as the theatrics to work. So what's another huge thing to point to that is that we have stuff like the government releasing UFO files to distract us in the the Hansa virus, which literally means scam virus. So like by definition, scam virus.
That's hilarious.
To get us to not pay attention to what the Epstein files actually says, which is these theories. And so, I mean, like, it is just a theory. It has a lot of weight to it. There's a lot of good evidence, and when you pull it from that big boy view of the world and how the economic structure and the geopolitics is actually going, and then you look at these Epstein files and how the power and money was actually moving, there's some weight to it.
Definitely.
Yeah, I just really wanted to point that out, especially with people who are now scared of a new virus. It's like, you can't be tricked one more time, right?
Right. Well,
We'll see.
We'll see. No, that's a great point. I'm glad you said that, because it is true that, the corporations, like Simon said, corporations are pulling the strings of the military. The technocrats, right? The largest companies in the world are technology companies. And so they've got a huge pull on everything. And then, the financial industry, of course, running through corporations. So, like he said, the lobbying, the people with the money sort of make all of it coordinate according to their own big plan. And so, I don't spend a ton of time digging into all the exact details of this, but I think the important thing here to know is just like the general understanding of what's happening, so that we can be aware of potential biases in news that we see, and just kind of be aware of trying to read through the lines a little bit and not get caught up on the surface level. That it seems to be the immediate thing that the majority of people are getting caught up on, maybe, and try to see maybe the subtler patterns that play over larger scales throughout time, throughout events.
For sure.
Yeah. Forced economists to build new tools to measure what was actually happening, because the old ones simply weren't designed for the new reality. In the industrial era, output per hour had to be invented because nobody had a way to capture physical productivity at scale. In the internet era, GDP ran into a rather embarrassing problem, which is that it could measure the value of encyclopedias sold in shops, but couldn't measure the value of Wikipedia, which replaced them altogether. So the US Bureau of Economic Analysis eventually had to build an entirely separate accounting framework, the Digital Economy Satellite Account, just to capture the value of services that existed outside normal market transactions. MIT is arguing that the AI era calls for a similar overhaul. Intelligence is now a shared input between humans and machines, and the tools we inherited were simply never designed to measure that. The Iceberg Index is MIT's attempt to build something that is. So how did they actually do it? Well, they started by creating a digital representation of 151 million American workers spread across 923 different occupations and 3,000 counties. To map the skills each occupation requires, they use something called ONET, a database maintained by the US Department of Labor that breaks down hundreds of occupations into their actual component skills and tasks. Things like analysing data, critical thinking, interacting with computers, programming and coordinating with others. And in the database, each of these skills comes with an importance rating and a difficulty level built from surveys of real workers doing those jobs. So instead of saying there are 4 million accountants in America, the database is saying, here are the 37 specific skills accounting work requires, here is how important each one is, and here is how difficult each one is to perform. Which is either a very thorough way to think about employment or a very bureaucratic one. But either way, it turns out to be extremely useful. Then they did the same thing for AI, cataloguing more than 30...
So, yeah, what's going on here is pretty interesting to think about. Like, we're changing the way that we have to understand value in the workplace as a whole because of AI, similarly to what took place with the Industrial Revolution and the internet. So, kind of the point here is just that now AI it's not necessarily taking your whole job, but it might take part of your job. And so how do we account for that in predicting the total effect that AI's introduction is going to have on society? So that's kind of what MIT is really trying to measure here and predict for is, okay, so a lot of accounts, people are saying 2.2% of jobs are threatened by AI at this moment. But through MIT's analysis, whenever you account for the total amount of work that is threatened by AI, and it's more like 11% of the jobs that are currently, where AI is at right now, threatened by AI. And so if the companies were to individually restructure their work environments to be more efficient because of these changes, then that would lead to faster job losses. And so it just sheds light on really the impact on jobs that AI is having and can have through looking at it from this new perspective. And so, I mean, it is a little bit alarming because if you had job losses 5% or more, then that could be enough to send the world into a recession, significant recession or depression. And that's just in the U.S. Like, if the U.S. loses like 5+% of jobs, then that could send the whole world into that kind of economic state. So, again, the goal is not to panic, but to just be aware and understand what really could be coming and not be in denial about the reality of the situation here.
Yeah, I think this is beneficial to know the steps to get to the new Earth because, I mean, no one really wants to do these meaningless jobs.
No.
So we do really need to figure out the safe way to not have this crazy collapse that's really detrimental to the humanity that's here, but really take the proper steps to get people into freedom.
Yeah.
So it's really important, and it's really cool that MIT is working on some system like this.
Yeah. No, exactly. Because at the end of the day, really the the great news is that abundance is not being lost. You know, us losing jobs is not us losing abundance. This is actually a sign of increased abundance, is that the AI can take your job now.
Right.
So we have to create a system that is intelligent and fair to coordinate the fact that, okay, so resources aren't distributed in the same way that they were before because of changing technology. So, but the abundance should still, if we arrange the system right and fair in a free market, et cetera, with responsible government policies, should lead to greater abundance for everyone, even if we are losing jobs. So, you know, that's a very complicated problem to solve, but being aware of what the objective is very clearly is really important. That's the you got to start there, so that you can create the system in a way that leads this incredible technology that we're being blessed with to create more abundance for the whole population, not just a select few of the population. So that kind of brings us back to the whole money situation of, you know, it's not the solution to everything, but it is potentially the largest aspect of the solution to everything is changing the money system, the economic growth system from debt-based to equity-based, from fiat money to hard money. And then, of course, there's lots of more nuanced approaches and policies and strategies that we can take to facilitate this growth into the new earth, to make the economic system of the world truly reflect the abundance that is our inheritance, our nature. So yeah, absolutely. We got to know, we got to be aware so that we can act accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, abundance is infinite, and so it's just going to be exponential in the humanity's timeline. That it's just finance, you know, whatever we want to call it, is just going to become exponential. I mean, we're seeing that with Bitcoin, of how it's just going to continue to rise. So it's like even the Bitcoin we have now, 100 years later, Bitcoin's going to be way higher, and all these systems are going to be way more exponential. So it's just realizing that abundance is infinite is a huge key thing to understand when you're looking at all these systems and not stuck in fear.
Exactly.
Realizing the infinite nature of abundance.
Exactly. It can be too easy to get in a lack fear-based mindset, seeing, you know, this threat of AI taking your jobs, rather than looking at the positive side of the abundance that is going to be created as a result, as long as we act from love instead of fear to create the systems to integrate this technology into our lives.
Yes, yes.
Long before anyone had heard of a large language model, to understand the pattern, you need to go back to 1965, when a Princeton economist named William Baumol and his colleague William Bowen noticed something odd about the performing arts. A string quartet performing Beethoven in the 19th century required 4 musicians and about 25 minutes. A string quartet performing the same piece 1 century later required the exact same number of musicians and lasted about the same time. Nothing about the performance had gotten more efficient, no technology had come along to speed it up, and yet the cost of putting on that concert had risen dramatically, dragged upward by wages rising everywhere else as manufacturing, agriculture, and industry got more and more productive. As factories and other industries became dramatically cheaper and faster, they could afford to pay their workers more, which pushed wages up across the whole economy, and musicians had to be paid competitively to attract talented people into the profession. Even though the output, 4 people playing for 25 minutes, never changed. So, the cost per performance kept climbing. Economists call this Baumol's cost disease, and the clearest way to see it is to look at what happened to prices over the last 50 years. The things that got more productive, like electronics and computers, got cheaper, while the things that couldn't get more productive, like childcare, education, haircuts, healthcare, and legal services, kept getting more expensive. These are all industries where the work is stubbornly human. You can't make a nurse see patients faster or a plumber fix a pipe remotely. So the only way to cover the rising wage bill is to raise prices, and AI is about to make this much worse. If the iceberg index is right and cognitive and administrative work is about to get dramatically more productive, then the Baumol effect will accelerate. Over the coming years, a financial analyst processing documents with AI assistance might shrink a day's work into an hour, and a software engineer with the right tools might do the work of 3 people. But the nurse will still need the same amount of time per patient, and the plumber will still need to physically be there. Their output doesn't scale with AI, so the relative cost of their work keeps rising, pulled upward by a productivity surge happening everywhere around them. This matters because most of the work AI can't touch is essential. People don't pull their kids out of school because costs went up or skip the plumber when the pipes burst. Healthcare, education, elder care, and skilled trades aren't things people can just stop using when prices rise. And most of them are either funded or subsidised by governments that are already stretched thin. So workers who are safe from AI disruption may find themselves in industries that governments will increasingly struggle to fund. Now, I want to be clear about something. The bomb all argument is a reasonable extrapolation from what the study found, not a finding in the study itself. Because the iceberg index tells you where the skill overlap sits right now, not what firms will do about it, how fast governments will respond, or which workers will successfully retrain. Those outcomes depend on decisions that haven't been made yet. And look, transitions like this have historically created as many new roles as they have disrupted. The transitions that went best were the ones where people could see what was coming clearly enough to prepare. Today, governments and companies are making billion-dollar decisions about AI using tools that can't see 95%
the simplest definition of enlightenment is freedom,
The map most
then this
people are using was
is
drawn
our
for a
ability to
different
create
economy.
freedom
The
for
iceberg
everyone.
index is an attempt to draw a better one. Whether anyone actually uses it is, as always, another question entirely.
All right, so to me that was super interesting. Kind of the key fundamental process going on there is the uneven price changes based on the growth of technology that we experience. So just like what he was referencing, whenever we have total technology increasing its efficiency, we can't increase the efficiency of certain things like plumbing or hospital care to the same rate that we can, write a code program that makes something more efficient. So then this is what happens is we have an uneven inflation. So inflation happens throughout everything in this fiat system, but inflation happens unevenly because of this phenomenon right here of technology making certain things more efficient at different rates than other things. And so this is normally a big problem because now you have to pay a lot more money to go to school or go to the hospital relative to the amount that you earn or relative to the cost of like a technology or a program. And this is just not ideal because these are essential things usually like plumbing and healthcare and school. And really one of the key solutions to this happens to be, once again, the money system. So in an inflationary money system, this is a huge problem. But in a hard money system, which is a deflationary money system, it's not nearly as much of a problem. It is still a real effect that will have to be dealt with, but in the hard money system, all prices fall over time relative to the money itself. And so that means that instead of like hospital bills literally getting more expensive, they will still get more expensive relative to the cost of like a computer or something, but the actual prices themselves won't go up. They'll only go down in a hard money system because it will take advantage of technological based deflation rather than having inflation. So definitely an inspiring problem to consider, to investigate and to research about, because if someone listening is interested in making some sort of plan or structure or free market based solution to this problem, in whatever way they could imagine, that could be a very valuable form of service to humanity, is to target this situation, because just as he said in the video, AI is going to exponentially increase the rate of this problem. So just again, another phenomenon that we should absolutely be aware of as a collective society and put our intention towards solving and just accounting for, with our full attention.
Yeah. Awareness is the key to all these things, not getting stuck up in all these fear loops that the government, these powers are really trying to keep us in. And so I think having that awareness and really leading from understanding that we're all one through love, unconditional love, is really the key. And really that is how we can create these system thinkers to actually create and solve these issues that we've been having and create the new earth.
Yeah, 100%. Once we start from that perspective of unity, of identifying equally with everything, not looking at things as separate from me, then that is the state of being of love that we cultivate, and from there, all of our actions will perpetuate and create more love. But then if we believe we're separate, we'll be in fear, and all of our actions will perpetuate that fear. So it really all does come back to that work at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think that's it for the timing. Yeah, well, I'll be it for this time. We have a lot more topics that we didn't touch upon. So either we'll touch upon them next week or next month, or we'll have a lot more news to talk about too. So, yeah, thanks for watching.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed.
Yeah, until next time.
Peace.